As we welcome in former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado. We find him in Montreal in advance of the Sharks-Canadiens game. How are you?
I'm good. What's going on, fellas?
Well, just last time since we last talked to you, big Canadian victory. So, as you mentioned last week, we still own hockey.
Okay. Have you noticed the losing players going on all the late-night talk show appearances? The Kachuk brothers doing the late-night circuit here?
So Matthew did it. Did Brady do it too? I thought I saw Matthew.
Brady did
Chicklets. Yeah.
They lost, though, right?
And accused the Canucks of not clearing Quinn Hughes because we know who they were rooting for.
Oh, baby.
Hey.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Like
and then chose to lose 2 games in regulation after the break?
Yeah, no, exactly. It wasn't
That's not something that players usually talk about. Like, you're so guarded and cautious about even your own team's medical staff, and then to talk about another team's is wild.
Hey,
wild times.
They're different cats, Brady and Matthew. They are paid to annoy as much as they are to perform.
And they came from a different cat and Keith, too, so no surprise.
Yeah.
Hey, so Frank, whether they make an Elias Pettersson trade or not, clearly there is a need for a top 2 center here with the Vancouver Canucks. Some names are emerging, some more gettable than the others, and we wanted to run some of those names by you. But let's start with Brayden Schenn, who is on trade blocks around the league, of course, in St. Louis. Apparently his old coach, Craig Berube, with the Leafs, is interested. Darren Dreger told us on Monday, hey, Berube, think the game a whole lot alike. Tell me about Brayden Schenn, because 33 years old now. He's under contract for 3 more years. What do you think? How much does he have left? Could he still be a top 2 center in the league?
Well, I would see him more as a middle 6 center at this point, ideally. And I think it's going to be a haul to get him out of St. Louis, because with that kind of package, what he brings to the table, the physicality, the winning attributes, the resume, the presence in the locker room, like all that stuff, St. Louis will turn around and say, well, you know what? If it's not going to be something that really helps us expedite things quickly, we're just going to keep him, because his value is more to us around guys like Kyrou and Thomas and Holloway and Broberg. So unless you're really willing to give up a lot, more than you would think you would need to give up for a 33-year-old, center who plays a rugged game and isn't going to get you, I don't know, he's not going to be like a massive point producer. You're kind of getting him for the intangibles, I think. And that makes a deal a little more complex, because on the surface, it could look like you're overpaying. But as far as what Brayden Schenn brings to the table, like you talk about, big kind of presence, alpha male guy, willing to fight, willing to hit, willing to do things, lead by example. He's going to bring all that. He's going to bring all that and more. And I'm sure Rick Tocchet would be salivating to bring in another player like that, like absolutely frothing at the mouth to bring in a guy that does that, where it can almost be like an extension of the coaching staff in the room and getting certain messages across and doing it with a lot of credibility. But I think, there's going to be a lot of teams calling. And with that being the case, like, it's going to have to be a package where you look at it and say, oh boy, like, we had to give up a lot to get that guy.
That vintage,
they have an opening for an alpha.
Yes, they do. That vintage of player, that kind of player, there's a few of them available, like Brock Nelson, Ryan O'Reilly, maybe, depending on who you talk to, and Luke Schenn. Like, they're all, or Brayden Schenn, they're all cut from the same cloth, and they're all around the same age. But is Schenn the guy that's got the most game left out of all of them, even though Nelson's having a decent year?
Nelson's having a good year, and he's had good years in the past, like 3 consecutive years where he's a 30-plus goal scorer. So you can't deny the goal-scoring ability. I think Ryan O'Reilly is still one of the most intelligent players in the NHL and has a lot of offensive upside to give. Might not have the same kind of jam or edge that Brayden Schenn has, and probably not as fleet of foot, but still like super crafty and intelligent of a player. There's a few other names, like you'll see on Friday And you could check any time, like our TSN trade bait board, like, Ryan Strome is going to be on our board. Nick Bukestad's a guy lower in the lineup. Ricard Raquel's a versatile forward who can play center. Scott Lawton's going to be a popular name. Like there's quite a few center options. Trent Frederick is another one. Obviously a lower in the lineup type guy, but gives you a certain spark. So there's going to be a lot of options out there. I think the acquisition cost is what's going to deter some teams from certain guys. But I think if the Canucks are looking to add a center, it's not the worst thing in the world for them. I think it just depends what your appetite is as far as what you're going to give up to bring in a centerman.
We've looked a little deeper than just the available UFAs, though, too. We've also gone down the road of, okay, guys with term, maybe a little younger guys, you're going to pay a lot more for, but the guys that maybe just aren't the right fit. People have combined this with Brock Besser trade talk and thought, okay, what do the Wild have if Besser was sent home? And I mean, the Wild have a diminutive center who's having a great season, highly skilled, but is 5'9" Marco Rossi, Bill Guerin's kind of player. Again, this is based on nothing. No rumor or innuendo that he's on that he's available. But are those the kind of calls that, this front office could make just to see if there's any appetite?
If that guy was available, I would be all over it. I'm a huge fan of this guy as a player. Forget about what the size looks like on paper. He plays a way bigger game, and he's really crafty, really skilled with the puck. He's so strong in like his skating base. Like I don't see him get knocked off it nearly as much as other guys who are bigger players. Like I think this guy has been what they would have hoped he would have been when they drafted him. But it's funny you mentioned Bill Guerin, because if you looked at the way Team USA was built, if you look at the way the Minnesota Wild are built, basically outside of Marco Rossi, it's big, burly players, and he is not that. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to, kind of find a young centerman and pluck someone that might not be a fit somewhere, like that might make some sense. You just have to find something that Bill Guerin is going to want in return moving forward, which, I'm sure he'll be happy to hold on to, a budding young star centerman as opposed to kind of getting rid of him for, not spare parts, but like it's going to have to be something significant coming back, which is the case with a lot of these young guys. But, I think very highly of Marco Rossi, and I think the fact that he's had the season he's had in Minnesota, a team that not overly offensive inclined. Kirill Kaprizov has missed a lot of time this season, and I think early on in the year we would have said, well, Kaprizov is driving things, and Marco Rossi continues to do it without Kaprizov there. So I think he's been a tremendous player, and if they were to move on from him, I would be all over it.
Our conundrum has been, where are the Canucks going to find their next center? And that's if you assume there's going to be a Pettersson renaissance. My goodness, if there is no Pettersson renaissance, where are the top two centers for the Vancouver Canucks for the next 8 years?
Let me tell you something just on that. The Pettersson renaissance is not happening this year.
No,
it's going to happen next year. If it happens, it's going to happen next year, because it's got to be, take the summer, rehab, whatever you got going on, get your mind right, and you come back. But like if there was a switch that would have been flipped, it would have happened already this year. Like this is who you got. Number 40 is who he is for the rest of the season, injury or not, whatever the mental block, all that kind of stuff. This is what you got in him. And so are you going to hold on to him and hope that whatever's bothering him gets fixed, and next year he looks like the guy that he's supposed to be? Probably, unless you trade him and then he does that somewhere else and then you regret it. Like I really don't know what the right answer is with this guy. There's so many things that seem to have happened now that it's like, you're just peeling back layers and layers of the onion at this point.
It may very well be determined by the next 4 games, including this double dip they have in Southern California starting tonight against the Kings. But should the Canucks be buyers, sellers, somewhere in between?
Nothing.
What would be your approach, your deadline approach here, if you were in the Canucks front office?
Boy, I'm probably leaning towards something in between. It's not a year where you're going all in, but if you can make some trades that maybe can help you for, I don't know, this year, next year, the year after, like you're probably not looking at a year where you're giving up assets for rental players, which is different than last year. And I'm not sure we would have expected them to be in that situation coming off the year that they had last year, but that's the reality. When your number one center is not chugging the way he's supposed to, you're just not going very far. Your number one defenseman is now hurt. Your number one goaltender is out, and who knows when he's going to be able to play. It's not a year for Vancouver to kind of make a run for things. So if you can, I guess, light sellers with bringing back assets that would help you kind of in the coming years is probably where I would peg Vancouver at this point. You're not you're not just giving up pieces for futures. You're giving up pieces for players that can help you a couple years or next year, basically down the road.
What would you do with Besser?
I would try and sign Brock Besser. And I know this is the thing that you have to be careful of. It's a watered down league, and teams are desperate to find players that can score goals. So regardless of what you think of him as a Canuck, the AAV, the term, the thing that a lot of these teams are facing right now is as long as he doesn't overplay it by too much, someone's going to give him something very close to what he wants. So if you can find a way to come to a fair market value with him, I would probably be leaning towards getting that deal done. He's not even 30 yet. He's 28.
28 just yesterday, yeah.
So if you get him done on a 6-year deal, that gets him to age 34, and you're just under $8 million or around $8 million. I mean, that's pretty much what the marketplace is going to dictate for a guy like that. Now, maybe he wants 7. Vancouver's the only team that can give him 8. But I mean, if he's looking at that and thinking, okay, Vancouver's offering me 6 years, $8 million or just under $8 million, and I like it here. Like, I don't know, what more are you looking for? You're basically saying at that point, I kind of just want to move on. And I guess I shouldn't say that. Like, we don't know what the player's thinking, but that would be something.
Well, he wants to stay here. He said he reaffirmed this week that he wants to stay here. AFP
so
Analytics.
That's a deal that would say you want to stay here.
7.7 at 9.3, which is
very rich.
A little bit rich.
7 at 9.3.
Yeah,
no, if I'm the Canucks, I'm not doing that. I would say you can try and find that somewhere else. And I think at 9 point whatever, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's going to pay you that. Like, ultimately it's going to be in the 8s. He's not a perennial 40 goal scorer. Like, he's a good goal scorer. He's a 30 goal guy. But you're not, like, unless someone's really, really desperate, Chicago's really desperate, or San Jose's really desperate, and they just have to spend a ton of money. I mean, you're not getting in the 9s.
Yeah, it's a lot of money for a guy who's never been fleet of foot, and the game's not getting any slower, that's for sure. So, some decisions there. I mean, Carson Soucy's a non-starter. In terms of buyer or seller, Carson Soucy's not making it past the trade deadline, is he?
Oh, I would think he's getting moved. And I think there's some teams that look for, like, they're looking for some penalty kill help. There's teams that are looking for some depth defenseman help. And like, it's a pretty digestible contract. And the fact that he's kind of fallen out of favor here would lead you to believe that, you can kind of like wash your hands with that. But I just think all these teams that are thinking, especially in the East, right? The East is so wide open. There's a lot of these teams that think they have the chance. It's their year, right? You go through the top 3 in the Atlantic, whether it's Toronto, Florida, Tampa, like, it's anyone's race. Washington, New Jersey, Carolina, there's no team that really stands out there. So a lot of these teams are going to have to bolster their blue lines and kind of get ready to go to war. And he's one of those guys that, he's a good battler. Like, he's a good penalty kill guy, rangy, plays on your third pair. Maybe he plays better, than he has in Vancouver this season. But I think there's a lot of teams that could use a player like that.
Lastly, Frank, I'm sure you heard Seth Jones last night of the Chicago Blackhawks after another loss, saying they have not gotten one iota better since game one. We already knew of Connor Bedard's frustration there. Now Donato, Maroon, Alec Martinez, they got some rentals that I'm sure they can peddle here as a non-playoff team. But does Kyle Davison have to do something bigger there in Chicago to kickstart this interminable rebuild on year 4?
Well, if he's going to move Seth Jones, which I guess Seth Jones wants to be moved, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine. Sure. Like, he's going to have to get something for Jones that is a young player who kind of fits with the young guys that they have there. And then this summer, he's going to have to go out and spend, but he's also going to have to convince. Like, you can say the piggy bank is open and we want to spend all this money, but what's your pitch to the top UFAs? Is it, you're going to play with Connor Bedard? Great. Connor Bedard hasn't really shown that he's a generational talent the way we thought he was going to be. He's going to be a star in the league, but you have to convince guys that are going to get this money, maybe on better teams, that you're the right choice for them. And so I think that's where the trouble comes into play for Chicago when it comes to trying to build their team. Like, what's your pitch to all these guys other than, hey, we have a lot of money to spend? And they have to do it. Like, they have to find a way. They cleared out all these guys, right? And they wanted to build from, nothing. And this is the challenge now. You drafted some guys, but it's not enough. You have to sign some good UFAs here, not just mentor type players, guys that can actually play with Bedard and play with Nazar and play with Vlasic and kind of build a group coming up together.
I got a $11.6 million centerman if he's interested.
Well, according to one podcast earlier in the season, they were, but I don't think that they.
We'll see.
It's hard now. You're selling, like, you'd be selling that at a low. And I just watched Carolina. They got beat by Montreal last night. I did that game, and I watched Rantanen play on that team, and I thought to myself, there's no way 40 could play on this team. Like, as much as they might like him as a player, that up-tempo, chip and chase, forecheck relentlessly style of hockey, that ain't working for him. So I would cross Carolina right off the list when you're talking about potential homes for him.
All right. Conundrum continues. Thank you for this, my friend. Have a great week. Catch up next Wednesday.
Okay, boys. Thank you. Have a good one.